All right, it looks like our numbers may start to level out. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome, 8A Stars through Industry Partners, and thank you for joining us. My name is Herman Lyons, and for the past 14 years, I've been a proud member of the 8A Stars program team. Today's webinar, Marketing Your GSA Contract, What You Should Know, is the first of 3 spring webinars that the 8A Stars 3 team plans on hosting to help you be successful 8A Stars through Industry Partners. Be on the lookout for save the dates for May and June training sessions. Before we get started, I'd like to mention just a few things. Everyone is in a listen-only mode to minimize disruptions. Please use the Q&A pod if you have any questions, and we will try to respond to those questions. On-screen closed captioning is being provided, and a link may be found in the chat pod. The webinar is being recorded. The presentation and recording will be shared with all industry partners later this week, and we will follow up with a survey to gauge interest in future topics, so please be thinking about that. Today's webinar will be a bit different than what we have done in the past because we have a guest from GSA's Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, or what we call the OSDBU. We've often referenced agency OSDBU offices in past trainings, so we thought this would be a good opportunity to hear directly from GSA's OSDBU office on how to leverage your GSA contract and to make you aware of the resources available to you. For those of you who are not familiar with the OSDBU, in simplest terms, they are advocates for everything small business. Additionally, I'd like to share that members of the 8A Stars 3 team have been collaborating with the OSDBU office and other GSA business lines to maximize the support provided to GSA contract holders. We look forward to this partnership and advocating for 8A Stars 3 industry partners. At this point, I'd like to introduce you to Sarita Dyson-Biesing. Sarita has been with GSA for 11 years and has served as the supervisory small business specialist in GSA's OSDBU office for the past 2 years. Prior to joining OSDBU, Sarita served as a special assistant to the GSA administrator and worked on implementing agency initiatives. Sarita attended the University of Maryland College Park, where she received a bachelor in political science and her master's in project management. Sarita also has an MBA from the University of Maryland. Sarita, thank you for joining us and sharing your perspective on marketing to the federal acquisition community. The floor is yours.
Herman, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for having me here today. Good afternoon, everyone. My name, as Herman said, is Sarita Dyson-Biesing, and I am with GSA's Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, where we are your small business advocate. So want to just really quickly go through our agenda for today. Why are we all here, right? So I definitely want our 8A Stars partners to know about GSA OSDBU, who we are and what we do. We want to talk about the importance of market research, right? Because in the federal market space, you know, and in this world in general, data is really important. So we want to talk about that, spend some time there. So we're making data-backed decisions. And then we want to outline some of those tools that you can use to conduct market research. And then we want to outline some of the key components for your strategy. So when you're developing a strategy to find opportunities in the federal space, we tend to offer a proactive approach. So we're just outlining some of the things that and tactics that we've used internally, which I'll discuss a little bit more, than some of the things that may be helpful to your business. And then we'll talk about some of the advantages of being a GSA contract holder. So you all have your STARS 3 GWAC. And so we're going to tell you some of the advantages that you have in selling points across the federal space. And then we're going to outline some tips for success. And we're going to try to do that all in an hour. So let's just jump right into it. So just really quickly, I want to make sure that all of our STARS 3 partners, you guys know who the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization is, what we do, and how we support you. So we're referred to as OSDBU. What we are charged with doing is helping small businesses find contract opportunities. So we interact with the acquisition workforce and ensuring small businesses have been considered at the prime and subcontracting level. So when requirements come through and they're above the simplified acquisition threshold, or if it's a scheduled buy and it's 6 million and above, we review it and we try to advocate for small businesses to be considered for those requirements. And so we have small business specialists located in 11 regions across the country, and we host training events throughout the year. And so I'll cover a little bit more of that at the conclusion of our presentation, but just wanted to set the scene so you know that, we're here for you to support all of you as our supplier partners that are small businesses. So we advocate for small disadvantaged businesses, women-owned small businesses, service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses, and those that are located in historically underutilized business zone. So we just help you navigate the federal landscape, and we believe in small business first. So everything we do is from a lens of how can we help small businesses. So marketing your GSA contract, that's why we're all here today, right? So what are some things that we need to do to develop leads in the federal market? So before I jump into the material for today's presentation, really wanted to talk about some of the things that we do here at GSA in the space of marketing the overall vehicles. And so within GSA, we do a lot of work to not highlight a particular supplier or vendor or company, but we highlight the overall vehicles for agencies to use. And so a lot of this training has been modeled around the efforts that we're doing in that way, and we're passing some of that knowledge on to you so that you can highlight your business that's on that particular vehicle. And so some of the steps that are really important in marketing yourself to these federal agencies is, understanding what federal agencies are purchasing your product or service, knowing how much they are buying, and if they've awarded any set-asides, right? So for those particular requirements, are they awarding any set-asides, or does it normally go open market or, unrestricted rather? And then understanding who your competitors are. So knowing who holds the current contract, right? So is that particular NAICS code or industry that you're looking to work with a particular agency, is that dominated by large businesses? If you have a particular requirement that you want to offer to a federal agency and there's a current contractor in place and the precedence has been that they typically go open and unrestricted, well, then you want to kind of delve into that and understand why. Is it because it's a particular security requirement? Is it because the business has cost accounting systems that were required that you did not have? So it's really important to understand your competitors, because sometimes your competitors can be your partners, or they can offer subcontracting opportunities to you as well, and that can be another revenue stream. And then you also want to look at what contracts are set to expire that you can compete for in the future. So there's a way that you can run an expiring contracts report so that you can see those requirements that are currently in place and have a good understanding of when those are set to expire and if you could potentially look for those in the future. So a lot of this is, understanding and using data to have a 30,000-foot view of everything that's happening in the federal landscape for the products or services that you're endeavoring to sell under your STARS 3 contract award, right? So it's almost like you're building your blueprint, like where are the opportunities? Where are the needs? And so we'll get into that a little bit, but, data can help you understand and answer the questions that we have on this slide here, right? Because if you don't know this information, it's kind of like you're leading blind. It always amazes me when we talk to small businesses and we hear about, I will say, so who are your target markets? And, oftentimes it's word of mouth or, looking at the opportunities on sam.gov or waiting for things to be posted on eBuy. And while it's okay to do that, what we're offering here and in this training is a proactive approach to finding those opportunities. And the only way to be proactive is to know the lay of the land, right? You have to have a map to understand like what is happening. So what we say is let the data refine your overall strategy, right? So you want to choose, if you develop a strategy where you know the departments and agencies that are purchasing your products and services, how much they are buying, where the opportunities lie, what's incentivizing them to request those requirements. So if it's a federal agency and they scored low scores in their FTARA with respect to modernizing their IT systems and they have a need to modernize certain systems, is that an opportunity for you? Because if you know that, then you can be more strategic in your time and your resources. So as this slide says, you know, let data help you work smarter, right? So instead of attending every federal event that every agency has, you would attend the ones or the events where those federal agencies actually have a need for your product or service. You've canvassed them, they're in your pipeline, and when you go to the event, you can ask the right questions that you need to have answered to help you keep building that particular opportunity or that potential opportunity. And then agency forecasts, they're everywhere, right? So every agency has a forecast, which we'll cover in a little bit, but there's a forecast with the sense of, you know, any procurements that are 2 or 4 years out, you know, early engagement with industry partners so that you can understand requirements that would be forthcoming that may fit what your company would be interested in, right? So right now, those forecasts are like every CFO Act agency and agent that's required to do it, they have a forecast tool. And so instead of looking through all of them, you would just focus on those target departments and agencies for opportunities. So what we're saying is that having the right data can really help you to effectively use your resources as a small business and be more strategic. And you're always in the ready. And I always say, if you stay ready, you never have to get ready. And having your ear to the ground and the pulse of what's happening in the federal market, which we'll discuss in a minute, that's really going to be advantageous to your business. So let's get into marketing and the lead generation and business development process. Herman and Lori told me that we have a diverse portfolio of SDBs and 8A companies on the line today. So some of you may have your own BD department and some may be running the business and conducting the lead generation and business development. Whatever space that you fall in, here's a process that we're saying that allows you to be proactive, right? So at a very high level, the first thing that we're encouraging suppliers to do is conduct your market research, right? If you don't know your market, you cannot make plans that are strategic. So the goal is you have to understand how to move. So you want to understand the federal business landscape for your products and services. And you want to know who is buying your products and services and what's incentivizing their need to have that, right? So you want to understand what departments and what agencies are purchasing your products and services, and that's by data, which we will show you in just a moment. And you want to have a clear understanding of what is causing them to source those requirements. Is it a policy, process, procedure? So that is what you want to do first. Conduct your market research. You get a 30,000-foot view of who has been consistently purchasing our products or services. We always recommend a 3 to 5 year trend just to see what's happening. Once you've conducted your market research and you see what agencies are, purchasing your products and services, of course, you want to tie that in with some qualitative data feedback as well. You want to identify the target agencies, right? So for example, the United States Department of Agriculture, it is a huge department with hundreds of agencies. So what particular agency within that particular department are purchasing your products or services? So it's really important to understand that, but also know the ones that have the strongest needs for those products or services that you're offering. And then you want to develop your strategic plan to outline, well, how are you going to focus your efforts, right? What are you going to do to capture those opportunities? And then you want to develop a marketing strategy that will outline the activities that you pursue, right? So, and then you refine your approach. So the key takeaway from this whole slide is make data-backed decisions and start with the data and end with the activities that you plan to implement so that you are working in a smarter, more strategic manner, right? So if you've conducted your market research and you know the lay of the land, say you sell IT services, and you know that in IT services, a lot of agencies are trying to modernize their federal systems, and you offer a way that they can do that. Well, then say you look at FITARA scores, and this is where every agency is scored based on their ability to modernize their systems according to requirements government-wide. And so if you see that there are particular agencies that are not meeting those efforts, your market research kind of is in line with that, well, then you want to develop your strategic plan. And you do that, and we'll go more in depth by learning more about that agency. Then you develop your strategy. Like, so what are the activities that you're going to undertake to move the needle? And then once you execute your activities, well, you're going to refine your approach, because obviously when you execute this for the first time, and if you have a minimal understanding of the federal market space, you may find that, you know, the agency may have another opportunity for you, or that agency might not be a good fit because they may have a policy that precludes them from using your business for whatever reason. But you would never know that if you didn't start with the market research. So how do we get there? How do we get all of this information, right, to understand and gain insight of what's happening in the federal space? And so one of the things that we encourage businesses to use is the sam.gov data bank. The data bank is, you want to think of it as a repository of receipts. So anytime the federal family or the federal government makes a purchase for products and services that are $10,000 or more, and they follow the federal acquisition regulation, that is the law of the land that contracting officers use to develop requirements to make purchases on behalf of the federal government, then they are going to enter that information into a system called FPDS. So what did I just say, and what did all of that mean? In my trainings, I like to use plain language because we always have people that are new and people that are seasoned. So FPDS, as you see on the screenshot here, that is where all of the information is entered. So every time a CO or contracting officer has a requirement, it's $10,000 or more, and they're required to enter that information into FPDS. It starts with them filling out something called a contract action report. So you get key information in terms of who is the buying agency, who's the buying department, how much they are buying, what NAICS code was used, the description of the requirement, the base award, the total contract award. All of that information is in this contract action report, and it goes into FPDS. So if you go to sam.gov, it's a reporting feature that you can use where you can run ad hoc reports and slice and dice that data however you want to get insight into what's happening in the federal government. Every time a CEO fills out that contract action report, FPDS is updated. And I wanted to pivot over to Herman, because I believe he has some input on the sam.gov reports as well. Herman?
Yeah, thanks, Sarita. Yeah, so sam.gov is really a great resource. And I think oftentimes we as 8A Stars 3 stakeholders, we commonly overlook it, right? Because we think of sam.gov as opportunities where, you know, those opportunities, they're, what's the term we like to use? They're hardwired or they're pre-wired for a certain industry partner. But I find great value in sam.gov if we use it appropriately and we don't get lost in sam.gov, right? sam.gov is one of those tools you'll get in there and you'll find out 3 or 4 hours later, like, what have I been doing in here? But a few things that I'd like to recommend and how you leverage sam.gov is, number one, you know, identify the NAICS codes, or we like to call them the swim lanes that you're working in, right? You know, NAICS codes like 541, 511, 512, 513, set up some reports in there. And simply what I'd like to encourage our industry partners to do are those requirements that are in the sources sought stage, or, you know, just RFI stage. Go ahead and identify those, meaning, so you've got your NAICS codes and you're looking at sources sought, and you're able to see these contracting officers and what they're planning on procuring, right? Now, I'm not saying this to mention that you're likely to win that requirement or the requirement next week or the one after. But an approach that I really like to suggest is use SAM.gov to build a Rolodex, right? In reality, the person buying IT services today is going to be the same person that's buying IT services next week, next month, and next year. And one of the things that we have learned in the 8A Stars 3 team and the 8A Stars 2 team as well is that the most successful industry partners really are successful with constant contact. So what's that mean? How does that tie into SAM.gov, Herman? Well, if I've got a report set up that every time a source of SOC comes out with a NAICS code of 541511, for example, and it could be a small business set aside, maybe it's an SDB set aside, maybe it's an 8A set aside, I'm going to go ahead and just reach out to that contracting officer and say, hey, how you doing? But the most important thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take that name and that email and I'm going to put it in my Rolodex. And whenever I execute my constant contact campaigns, now I've got somebody that I can actually share my information with. And before you know it, you've got 50 contacts, you've got 100 contacts, you've got a couple hundred contacts in which you could actually do some really good communication. Now, the likelihood that you win a task order award right off the bat is probably pretty slim to none, right? However, if you continue doing constant contact and contracting officers know that you provide valuable services and that you have an 8A Stars 3 GWAC that you can leverage to make their lives easier, then that's when you start to grab attention. So keep in mind, SAM.gov is a great place to build your Rolodex. It's a great place to put together your constant contact strategy. And don't hesitate, set up the parameters, set up the search where these resources and these search parameters come to you. I know plenty of companies, we're coming up on summertime, they have interns and they have their interns being responsible for SAM.gov. So go ahead and leverage the data in SAM.gov, build that Rolodex so you can build a constant contact campaign, and you'll be surprised 2 or 3 years from now, you'll have, what could have been 100 contacts may result in 30 or 40 good leads. So just keep that in mind, and that's how we like to recommend SAM.gov. Also, again, don't get lost in SAM.gov. Everybody's in SAM.gov, right? When you go to SAM.gov, have a purpose. Sarita said, start with data and then with activity. SAM.gov is an activity, right? Perhaps maybe you want to filter by agency. So just be clear-eyed on your intention when you go into SAM.gov. Thanks, Sarita.
Yeah, no worries there, Herman. And just kind of wanted to add to when you talked about building your Rolodex of contacts. This is a very powerful tool because there are data fields where you can actually find out because COs purchase different things, right? So you have a CO for IT, a CO for furniture. You can actually get the person that submitted that contract action report. It is a very powerful tool. There's training videos. And we always encourage companies to have someone who's data savvy because there's a lot of large data sets. And also the one thing that I wanted to caution you of is that it's heavy in contracting jargon, but if you could get past that hill, it pays well. The companies that I meet with that have experienced success, they are active and they understand what's happening. They have a pulse. So just wanted to talk about that. But like Herman said, it's not just SAM.gov. You also have USA spending, which is a little bit easier of an interface. You're not able to do the ad hoc reporting that you're able to do in SAM.gov, in the data bank, but it does provide information on agency spending and budgetary information. And it provides a high level overview of what's happening in those particular markets. FPDS does serve as the source of the data. So you are free to use this resource as well. And the way I like to think of the SAM.gov is when you want to get into some really heavy analysis, and you're ready to run some ad hoc reports. SAM.gov is a good place to go. And another key piece of information we have here are the GWAC dashboards. And I'm going to hand it over to Herman here because this is his area of expertise.
Yeah, thanks again, Sarita. Now, we've got about 318 people on the line, and I would hope that if I sent out a poll to say who has heard of the GWAC dashboards, I would hope that at least 315 people have heard of it. But again, guys, the GWAC dashboards are a GWAC tool. We created this tool, I don't know, it's probably been about a decade ago. And what the GWAC dashboard simply does is displays GWAC task order data by contract family, federal agency, and industry partner. Now, Sarita's talked about a few things such as FPDS, and she's also talked about expiring task orders earlier. So the GWAC dashboards are fed a couple different ways. The number one way the GWAC dashboards are fed is by FPDS. You all as industry partners also have an obligation to make sure that the information that's coming from FPDS is accurate and that you have attached your attachments within the file as well. So just know that the GWAC dashboard is a combination of data coming from FPDS and also our industry partners, okay? Our GWAC dashboards are updated every morning about 4 a.m. So whenever task order information, or I should say whatever task order information is entered today, you'll see it tomorrow morning, first thing when you log in, all righty? And then a few other things that I want to say. Sarita also mentioned identifying expiring task order awards. And I know Lori, Blend, and myself have really harped on this, but all of those 8A Stars 2 task order awards that are going to be expiring between now and August of 2024 can be found in the GWAC dashboards. Again, one of your approaches may be to identify expiring task order awards, to identify if that incumbent is on 8A Stars 3 or not, if there's an opportunity for a recompete, and to see if you might be able to engage with that incumbent as well as that contracting officer. So just keep in mind, the GWAC dashboards are a tool for us, by us. It's got all GWAC task order information in there. If and when you have questions, any member of the 8A Stars 3 team can help you out with that. So thanks, Rita.
Thank you, Herman. And so another great resource that we're going to pivot to is the forecast tool. So this is GSA's forecast contracting opportunities tool. So this looks at things that are 2 years out that GSA and other agencies that are listed in the tool, I believe we have 3 others, where they're outlining potential opportunities. So they're in the acquisition planning phase, and these are things that, you know, we're thinking of potentially procuring, and it helps us to have, you know, early engagement with industry around upcoming potential contracting opportunities. So the forecast tool can be found at www.fbf.gov, and I would be remiss if I didn't say, or at least talk about what's happening in the federal space before we move and transition back into our marketing strategy presentation around Executive Order 13985, where our president and the administration has committed to increase spending with SDBs by 50%. So I would highly encourage all of our 8A Stars 3 partners to be canvassing the forecast tools and looking at information, because every agency, GSA, we just announced a press release where, you know, historically the SDB goal has been 5%, but now it's a negotiated goal across government, and our goal is 21% this year. So that's a 4-fold increase. So I highly encourage our industry partners to not only take a look at the GSA's forecast, but those target agencies and departments that you're focusing on, definitely want to be looking for that information. So we press on and we go into your marketing strategy, right? So we talked about in the previous slide, you know, just, you know, the lead generation, right? So conducting the market research, identifying the target agencies, developing your plan. So I want to take a deeper dive in that and talk about the market assessment a little more, in the sense that, you know you've done your market assessment, right? Where you have a good understanding of where you're positioned in the federal marketplace. And when I say you have a good understanding, it's backed by data. And it confirms that you know what agencies and departments are purchasing your product or service, you know how much they are purchasing, you understand what's driving the need for your product and services, so that you can establish what is your value proposition that you're bringing to the table. How are you going to help federal agencies solve their problems and meet their mission through your products and services? Your market assessment should definitely set you up to let you know the value that you would be adding. And based on that, again, you know, you want to focus on the federal agencies and departments that you want to target, and those where you feel you would have the most influence on. And again, that's based on your market research. But one of the things that we always encourage small businesses to do is to narrow your market to a manageable size. A lot of businesses try to take on everything at one time. And so, you know, you want to pick the things that you're really good at, get good at those, and focus on those quick wins, and then add to it as you go along and you get accustomed to the market. Again, I know we have a diverse set of companies on the line that are a little more seasoned, some that are new. So wherever you are, you just want to make sure you're doing this at a manageable size. Competitive analysis, again, understanding who your competitors are, and the advantages that you have over your competition. Also understanding, could competitors be partners, for CTAs, contracting teaming arrangements. In the federal space, that's a huge thing. When you want to go after a particular requirement, you can form a CTA, and knowing the key players in the market and networking with other vendors that are on your STARS 3 contract, and just those that are in the federal space or in the GSA ecosphere for that matter, that's advantageous to you if you're looking at teaming on a particular requirement, or if you're looking for subcontracting opportunities. So let's say that perhaps one agency is dominated by large businesses for the most part for the particular product or service that you provide. Well, to keep the revenue streams going, that competitor could be a potential subcontracting opportunity, but you wouldn't necessarily know that without doing that market research and having that assessment, knowing who those target markets are, and then understanding the competitors and how that landscape is set up, and then working it in a way that works best for your business. Another key component and something important to understand in the federal space are regulatory restrictions. We have a lot of executive orders and compliance postings that are coming out about things that, if you're a federal contractor, these are the things that you need to do to have those things in order. Certain agencies, for DoD, for example, the biggest thing is, the security requirements that you're supposed to have if you're offering any services to them. So it's really important to understand the regulatory restrictions for those target markets and agencies that would preclude you from being, picked as a source or even bidding on those contracts because you don't have the proper, certifications and things that you need in place. So it's really important that, you understand what's needed and assess the cost that it would take for your business to comply with those standards and actually execute on them. I know a lot of times we see a lot of small businesses, there's certain agencies, particularly within the space of DoD, they want you to have certain types of security clearances, right? So when you're talking about, you're switching over to your SWOT analysis, if you need to have a certain security requirement, well, is that something that you want to put into your long-term strategy? If that's identified as a weakness, how do you overcome that in 3 to 5 years? So you want to look at those things. So have a good understanding of regulatory restrictions, the ones that you need to be concerned about, the ones that you're meeting, and those that you can be concerned about, what's your plan to address them so that you can continue to qualify for opportunities. It's really important to have a good pulse on that. And then after you have all of this information, you want to understand your strengths. What is a selling point and a selling strength as to why agencies should be using you, your strengths in the market, any weaknesses that you could have, any opportunities that you can seize, and any threats that you want to develop a plan and overcome. And then you start developing your short-term and your long-term strategy. And your short-term strategy would be, those things that you want to do in the near term, 1 to 2 years. And then your long-term strategy is like 3, 5 years out, however you want to look at it. But it's like, what do we need to do to continuously put ourselves in a space where we're capitalizing on our strengths, we're addressing our weaknesses, and so that we're able to seize opportunities. And so that's something that we wanted everyone to think about here. And I just wanted to give Herman the opportunity from a GWAC perspective to speak to any of those points.
Yeah, I would, Sarita. Thank you. So topic number 2, right? I should say point number 2 here, target markets. We, as 8A Stars 3 industry partners, have a tendency to try to be everything to everybody because we have this ability to receive sole source awards. And, if we see a shiny object over here, we run over here. And if we see another shiny object over there, we run over there. And really, that's debilitating to you as a contractor. We always encourage you to identify up 3 to maybe up to 5 agencies that you would like to work with. And we just don't pull that number out of the air. We've done analysis. We've been doing this since the 90s, right? And we've seen that the most successful companies, they choose to build their roots deep rather than building their roots wide. And let me give you an example. If you receive a task order award with the Department of Agriculture, the likelihood of you receiving another task order within Department of Agriculture is probably pretty good, as opposed to you receiving another task order award with another agency that you don't have any work at, right? So the idea is, instead of spreading yourself really wide and thin, build your roots really, really deep within USDA. So keep that in mind. You know, as 8A Stars 3 industry partners, we've got some great features and benefits on this contract, right? Especially sole source, but we can't be everything to everyone. Also, Sarita mentioned the contractor teaming arrangements, or CTAs, a little earlier. What's cool about our GWACs is that CTAs aren't even a thing with our contract vehicles, right? How cool. If you run schedules, you'd have to do CTAs, but we totally give you the flexibility to subcontract with whomever you'd like. That can be anyone from the business down the road to IBM downtown, right? As long as you stay within those limitations on subcontracting, we realize that you need capacity building, and we realize you need great flexibility in order to put total solutions together. Also, that SWOT analysis, step number 5, focus on what you're good at, right? There's really, you could take one of two paths. You could strengthen your strengths, or you could try to make your weaknesses better. There's two different trains of thought here, right? However, I would encourage you, if you're strong, if you have a strength that you can chase, or you can exploit, do that. Okay. So Sarita, that's all I got. We can go ahead and go into the next slide. I know you and I'll be tag teaming some things on the next slide as well.
Yeah, no worries. And thanks for that bit of clarification on the CTAs. I really appreciate that. Going on into some of the advantages. So it's really good to understand your value proposition. You have an 8A, a STARS 3 contract. What does that mean to me as a contracting officer, right? And so some of the things that, those of you that are new to the program, you want to understand is that when you went through the process, we negotiated pricing. Everything that was set up within your contract was built to be FAR compliant. That's Federal Acquisition Regulation compliant. So whenever a contracting officer that follows the FAR, which is a vast majority of agency, has to put together requirements, they follow the FAR. So if you're already FAR compliant, you help them to streamline their procurement process to go a lot faster. And it also provides access to you all as a small business, because you are on the STARS 3 program. And then it also provides access to emerging technologies and innovative solutions. A big part of what we do within the GSA ecosystem is that we create contract vehicles that makes it easier for our federal customer agencies to meet their mission critical goals in an innovative way using emerging technologies. And so that is here your selling point as part of the STARS 3 program. And I know that Herman had some other things that he wanted to talk about with respect to your value prop as a STARS 3 participant. Herman?
Yeah. So the one thing that comes to mind is flexibility, right? And I mentioned a few minutes ago that you all, as 8A Stars 3 Prime Industry Partners, you guys have the flexibility to subcontract with whomever you'd like, right? We didn't evaluate subcontractors when we evaluated the 8A Stars 3 GWAC. So that's some flexibility that you have there. You have the ability to craft total solutions. We understand GWACs are made for IT services and IT services-based solutions, right? You're not limited by SINs, you're not limited by many, many things with the GWAC, as long as your requirement is IT services and IT services-based solutions, and obviously doesn't go against the spirit of the GWAC. But one thing I'd like to focus on too is the ancillary support, right? And other contract vehicles, these things may be called ODCs. However, ancillary support is allowed on your task order awards as long as it's integral and it's necessary to accomplishing the IT service being performed. So just think about those flexibilities. And when you speak to contracting officers and acquisition professionals, make sure that they know about the flexibility that's built within your GWAC. Also, very important, extremely important, is that 8A Stars 3 is a best-in-class contract vehicle. Oftentimes you'll hear it referred to as BIC, all BIC stands for is best in class. 8A Stars 3 is a tier 3 best in class, which means it's among the best of the best. So whenever you're speaking with contracting officers and they wonder why they should consider using you or why they should consider using this contract vehicle when there's other contract vehicles out there, you should be talking about flexibility. You should be talking about 8A Stars 3 is a best in class vehicle as designated by the Office of Management and Budget. So those are a couple of things. Also, I'd like to highlight the client support that we provide. Now, you all are on the industry side of the fence, but we engage every day with contracting officers and acquisition professionals and provide client support such as consultations. I can't tell you how many consultations we provide with with customers, as well as scope reviews, for example, right? So if customer has a requirement, they're not quite sure if it's IT enough for 8A Stars 3, have them send it over. Those are the type of things that we do every day to help support your customers. So when your customers want to know the advantages of Stars 3, be sure to go into the bullets that we've talked about here on this slide, which are GSA in general, but go in deep. Let them know those great things about 8A Stars 3 and the flexibility that you can provide them and how they can reach out to us should they have any questions. We think that it'll go a long, long way. And if we do a good job in the 8A Stars 3 team, if we do a really, really good job of letting them know the features and benefits of this vehicle, there's a high chance that they're going to come back to you and give you an opportunity to do some work. So just a few things to keep in mind as you go on your journey and talking about the advantages of 8A Stars 3.
Thank you, Herman. So moving on, I'll just quickly go through this slide here. So SBA, these are the small business goaling reports, and it outlines how well agencies have performed with meeting their small business goals. We talked about how the federal family is aggressively trying to meet this new mandate to increase spending with SDBs. And so one of the things that I just wanted to call your attention to is take a look at those goaling reports for those target agencies that you're going to be looking at, right? Because every agency, including GSA, we're all trying to determine, how do we create more opportunities for SDBs to meet this aggressive goal, right? And every agency has a new SDB goal. And so because you're a part of the 8A program, you also have the SDB designation. So it would benefit you to really have a good pulse and understanding of what are some of the agency strategies and tactics that they are going to be implementing to meet this aggressive call to action. And does that fit within your wheelhouse or products and services with those federal agencies? So that's something really important to think about there. Herman, did you want to mention anything about this here?
No, Sarita, I think you've done a really, really good job covering it. Just, keep in mind that 8A Stars 3 serves a purpose, right? And one of those purposes is to help federal agencies, help businesses who have traditionally been left out of federal procurement. And how they achieve those goals is through small business goaling, right? So just keep that in mind, leverage it. If you have any questions on how to best leverage it, don't hesitate to reach out to the Stars 3 team.
Awesome. So one thing that we wanted to call out is that, so we have the way we're looking at this training, we understand our marketing strategies. So we have our marketing assessment, our competitive analysis, our SWOT, we understand our value proposition. So now we're talking about creating agency profiles, right? So this is like a one-sheeter where you understand the budgetary information as it relates to the products and services that you're offering. You understand the key players, right? So a lot of this is pulled in those reports we talked about, right? In sam.gov, you can run a report where whoever entered in that information, that's probably the contract specialist or the CO. So maybe that's a way to do it. Maybe you use networking, finding out who the key players are at that particular agency, understanding upcoming opportunities that you're looking at. What did you extrapolate from a forecast to? What did you extrapolate from running your reports? Small business goals. How are they doing with the small business goals? And how does it fit within the confines of the products and services that you would like to offer to this agency? Then understanding the competition. Right? So this is the one-sheeter. I'm going to go meet with Department of Commerce this week around a particular requirement. I'm going to bring this one-sheeter with me because I have a clear understanding of what's happening here so that I'm prepped for this meeting. I have this information. Obviously, these are updated continuously. But if you have your target agencies and departments, we encourage you to have these agency profiles. I've seen some businesses be so detailed where they have pictures of the key players and their bios are included. So it's not a one pager, it's much longer. And so again, this is a helpful tool for you to have to prep for a meeting and have a good understanding of how you want to interact with that agency around, these topics. Like, do you want to set a meeting with one of the key players? What do you want to meet with them about? Is it about any upcoming opportunities that you have in your sales pipeline? Do you want to know if you need to keep it, you need to remove it? Do you want to canvass any upcoming industry days that they have? Do you want to ask about industry days? So, as a small business, and typically the small ones that, there's 4 running the business, this is helpful for you to have so that you can ask the right questions with the end in mind and be strategic in using that time, because typically 30 minutes to an hour, they go by really fast. And typically when you're doing a quick interface, particularly with matchmaking, and it's just about 10 minutes, you want to go to the table really quickly, have a high level understanding of what's happening to put you in the position to ask the right questions and set you up for success there. So that's what we wanted to say about the agency profiles. And Herman, did you have anything that you wanted to add with respect to the agency profiles there?
Yeah, I would. And as you guys heard from Sarita doing a great job of describing this, it's a lot of work to create an agency profile, right? Now, could you imagine doing this for 10 different CFO departments? It would be a huge undertaking, right? And so this is one of the reasons right here that we have seen the most successful companies on 8A stars and predecessor programs have only targeted 3 to 5 different agencies, because maintaining an agency profile in and of itself and doing a good job is hard work, right? Things change every month, points of contact change, et cetera. So I just wanted to highlight that. Take a hard look at this slide and understand if you're doing each one of those five boxes effectively, then it should take a lot of time. And this is why you don't want to spread yourself too thin. If you're focused on USDA, you want to know everything around USDA and those buying activities. That way, when you do engage with those people, you're not going to get 30 minutes of time at a trade show, right? You may get 2 or 3 minutes, and as Sarita alluded to, make it a really, really good 2 or 3 minutes. So that's all I have on this slide, but take this very, very seriously, because if you don't, you're going to find yourself skating on ice and spread yourself really, really thin. And when you spread yourself thin, it's really, really hard to get any traction with federal acquisition professionals.
Without question, that is a very good point. You never want to spread yourself too thin. You want to be strategic, and the data piece will certainly help you to do that, to work smarter and more strategic for sure. So what we talked about earlier, we mentioned that GSA, we have a retail component, right, where we actually promote GSA's entire suite of products and services. So we promote all of our GWACs, we promote all of our schedules, all of our vehicles to federal agencies. And so it's similar to what you all are doing. So we have customer service directors, and they're called CSDs within our federal acquisition service. And we have folks that run data that help us strategically understand what federal agencies and departments are using GSA's products and services. How much are they using? What went outside of a GSA vehicle that could have gone to a GSA vehicle, and why? And then you have customer service directors who come in and meet with the CEO, talk to them about GSA, outline the requirements that could have gone through a GSA vehicle, did not, show them how that value proposition is faster than going to market, far compliant, competitive pricing at best value. And then the CEO, hopefully all goes well, they'll start sourcing those requirements that for common spend items or those less complex procurements through the GSA contract vehicles, so they can focus on mission critical, other mission critical goals and objectives. And so the reason why I am showing you the customer service directors, because it's a very powerful tool. Because if you come across a federal agency that's not familiar with GSAs, like using GWACs and understanding the value, you have a CSD who has a good understanding of those programs, all of our GSA programs, but particularly because this is a GWAC audience, they have a very good understanding of the GWACs. They have a good understanding of the program managers and purchasing officials. And what they'll do is they will provide training on GSA specifically. But one thing that I wanted to caution everyone is that these, we're a procurement agency, we're federal employees. So we never promote any business. We promote the vehicle. Everything that we've talked about today leading up to this slide is on you to highlight your business as part of that vehicle. So the CSD is highlighting the GWAC, quick use, FAR compliant, help you meet your small business goals. We know you're using this vehicle, you haven't used GWACs, and it's up to you to now understand the departments and agencies that have a need for your product and services and sell yourself, right? So you've done all the work, you have your STARS 3 contract, right? You have customer service directors that are regularly engaging with these agencies to talk about advantages of using requirements and helping them to use GSA's vehicles. And so back to my point, if you come across a CO or someone that isn't familiar, apprehensive, you can refer them or contact a CSD, and they will talk about GSA, not your company, but GSA specifically. And I think that's a very helpful resource for our industry partners on the line today, so that you can help, federal contracting buyers if they don't have an understanding. Anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, a lot of you industry partners are probably familiar with eBuy and what we call an MRAS, right? The market research as a service that you guys see coming out through eBuy. That's a perfect example of what CSDs do and how they interact with federal agencies. So keep CSDs in mind, keep us in mind if your customer has any questions about GWACs between CSDs and our team over here. We can get those questions answered. So yeah, just keep in mind when you see MRAS, those are just an example of CSDs helping a customer. And when you see those, just put your thinking hat on, right? Think about how can I leverage the services of CSDs to see if I possibly might be able to bring them to the 8A STARS 3 GWAC and to give me an opportunity for business. So that's all I have, Sarita.
Thank you very much, Herman. I appreciate that point, because the MRAS is a really, really powerful tool that we're using to help sourcing agencies to really, really define and put their requirements together. So that is a very helpful tip there. So you do want to be responsive to those. So moving on, would like to leave behind some takeaways. We're nearing the close to our presentation here. Some of this stuff, but I'm going to kind of quickly give you some parting tips for success. And the one thing is respond to RFIs and source of thought notices. We talked about OSDBU, who we are and what we do. And we said we interface with the acquisition workforce to ensure that small businesses have been considered for opportunities. And one way that we're able to do that is if you respond to an RFI or source of thought notice, and it's determined that 2 or more small businesses in the market can provide or source that requirement, then it's automatically set aside for small businesses. So if you don't respond, then it's likely not set aside. We realize that responding to RFIs and source of thought notices take us a lot of time. And so industry, you want to make sure that it's something that's really, really fits within your wheelhouse. But when you respond to those RFIs and source of thought notice, you want to make sure you're providing a complete response, because typically an RFI and a source of thought notice, it turns into an RFP eventually. So that's a very powerful tool to be successful in the federal space. Also attending industry days. Industry days are hosted quite frequently. Our partners in FedSim, they host them. Other agencies across government host them. And so if there's an industry day coming up about a particular requirement, you definitely want to attend, because those industry days will provide important information about upcoming requirements that you might want to be thinking about in terms of technical information, estimated costs, the type of contract contemplated, and the timeline to industry. So the idea or the goal of the industry day is to share everything the requesting agency knows regarding the potential requirement at the time, and also to encourage subcontracting and teaming arrangements where appropriate. Herman, did you want to say anything else about industry days before I keep going?
Guys, I realize that these past 3 years have been kind of crazy, right? Yeah, but if you guys can get out and attend industry days, please, please, please do it. What I would suggest is just like going into sam.gov or any other resource, before you go to an industry day, have a plan. Have a plan of attack and what you want to accomplish at the event, what you want to accomplish after the event to make the most use of your time, especially if you're paying money in exhibiting, for example. One thing that I'll say too, Sweet, if I can, the first block, respond to RFIs and sources sought notices. One of the cool projects that we did on 8A Stars 2, the predecessors, we had a series called Listen and Learn. And it was an opportunity for us to interview the most successful companies on the 8A Stars 2 GWAC. And they all had different strategies, different approaches, but the one thing that they all had in common was responding to RFIs and sources sought and being very diligent about it. So if the best companies on 8A Stars 2 focused on responding to RFIs and sources sought, I would highly encourage you to do the same as well. So, but that's all I have on this slide, Sarita.
Thanks so much, Herman. I really appreciate that. And then, also with the industry days, when you attend the industry days, I know oftentimes I have companies that send me their capability statements, and I think it's great. But if you're attending an industry day, bring your capability statement and share it with some of the other partners in the room. You want to network with your other Stars 3 partners around opportunities, right? And it's always good to have those peer-to-peer engagements. So, I know we have a diverse set of companies on the line right now. So network with the other people on the phone. If you're a new Stars 3 company and there's one that it's a little more seasoned, connect with them. Around opportunities, learn from each other. It's a really powerful tool. You have each other's contact information. It's on GSA library. So that's a very important tool. And we cannot overemphasize the importance of industry days. I know that our partners over at FedSim, they've been doing virtual industry days. Today is my first day back in the office. So we're back in the office now. So more industry days and we're getting back to some sense of normal. So we definitely encourage you to attend those. Also, check eBuy for opportunities, right? So this is one of the things that, kind of wanted to just talk about when we have matchmaking events in the small business office, if we have any training events, if we're trying to get your opinion about different things, we normally use your government point of contact that's listed in GSA in eBuy. We're reaching out to that person or whatever your government POCs are, that's who we're connecting with. So you definitely want to provide at least GSA, your proper contact information in the email that is being checked, because all industry days, sources sought notices, and due diligence sessions are posted directly on GSA eBuy. So if you do not have, make sure you check your point of contact that's listed in GSA eBuy to ensure that you have the right person there and that it's being checked regularly so that you can see what RFQs, RFPs, and RFIs are being issued. So if you're not registered in GSA eBuy, we do recommend that you do so. Did you want to mention anything about eBuy there, Herman?
You said it, Sarita. Make sure that you guys are registered. We've mentioned it a million times, but I'll leave it at that. Make sure you're registered in eBuy and all other systems and that your information is accurate, up to date, and that you're checking it.
Fantastic. And so, Herman, I'll let you talk about the use of the GSA logo there and how to do that as well.
So feel free. Yes, I know we're running a little short on time. So if you have to run off, please go ahead. We will be sending out the recording to all industry partners. But again, we just wanted to remind you, use the GSA logo. There's several GSA contractor logos that you can use on your website, your marketing materials, etc. Also be sure and leverage the 8A Stars 3 logo. It's on our website. Feel free to right click, copy as, and put it in your marketing material. But please, please, please make sure that you're compliant with the logo guidelines, right? There's standards in terms of GSA logos, and you don't want to come across as though you're being supported by GSA, et cetera. So use the GSA approved contractor logos and put that on all your marketing material, put that on your website. That way folks can really quickly see your GSA contractor, and they can associate all those great GSA contract features with you and with your company. And then I think next, Rita, we had a slide on maybe, I'm sorry if you wanted to go ahead and mention that, but yeah, I talked about GSA websites, and I wanted to make sure that you make your GSA website friendly, right? Again, use one of the GSA logos, and I can't say it enough. comply with the 8A Stars 3 contractor webpage requirements. We should all know those, taken from G.7 of the contract, but make sure that a link to the 8A Stars 3 website is on your 8A Stars 3 webpage. Make sure your master contract number is on your webpage. The DUNS number has gone as of about 4 days ago, so make sure that your UEI number and your cage code is also on the website. And then lastly, I can't tell you how many times we hear from contracting officers saying that I can't find a point of contact for this company. Please, please, please make sure your point of contact is on your website. Make sure it's very clear. So when somebody wants to engage with you about the 8A Stars 3 GWAC, that you have a point of contact. Okay. So again, just make sure you get that information up to date. I've got a reminder in my notes, but I'll go ahead and say it now. If you have not submitted your GSA 8A Stars 3 webpage for review, you're late. You need to get that done. And also, if there are corrections, if we've emailed you back and corrections need to be made, please go ahead and take care of that. That way we don't have to keep doing this back and forth for the next couple of months. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Herman. And because we're running quick on time, we're going to go through this. So in OSDBU, we created fact sheets. And so it's just a one-sheeter, and it provides quick information on pertinent government topics. So we talked about the sam.gov data bank. I was looking in the chat box. I noticed we got a lot of questions around that. This one-sheeter here, if you go to gsa.gov/OSDBU fact sheets, it helps you to get access to the training videos, why it's helpful, what you need to use. So we encourage you to take a look at those fact sheets there. Also, we encourage you to visit us at gsa.gov/OSDBU events. We host events throughout the year. We're currently partnering with SBA right now to conduct a Money Smart series. So it's about managing the finances of the business. So a lot of things that we talked about today, your value proposition, then managing your record keeping, financial management, establishing strong business credit with the capstone course, including accessing SBA's loan programs, so, if you're increasing employees from like 3 to 20, you need access to capital. So those are the type of training events that we provide. So we really encourage you to sign up for those. And we encourage you to take a look at our subcontracting directory as well. Large businesses are required to submit a subcontracting plan to outline how they plan to provide opportunities for small businesses, socioeconomic small businesses. So check out our subcontracting directory, because that presents another revenue stream for our small business audiences. So I am going to hand it over to Herman now to close this out with the poll and any questions. Herman?
Yeah. Yep. Thanks, Rita. Hey, Lori, if you wouldn't mind, Lori, if we could launch our poll. We've got a poll for you guys to gauge your interest in this training and future trainings. There you go. And we'll leave these up for a little while, but we just really want to know, guys, was this training helpful to you or not? Was it a waste of time? Was it beneficial? Please let us know. If we find that it is beneficial, we'll continue to do trainings like this. If we find it's not, we'll kind of alter we'll adjust ourselves, I should say. So, and Lori, whenever you see things slowing down, you can go to the next question, Lori. I'll leave it up to you, my friend. All right, perfect. Thanks, Lori. And our second question. So what's your level of comfort? We want to know, where are you? We have companies on this vehicle with $20 million a year in gross receipts, and we have companies with about $75,000 in gross receipts. So just let us know where you are in terms of your level of comfort. This helps the entire 8A Stars 3 team just take a look at this vehicle holistically and see where our industry partners are. So. All right. Perfect. Awesome. So we had about 148 who answered the first question, 144 for this one. So I'd say that's close to 100% for those both too. Right on. Thanks, Lori. I think we can close the polls down. And then Sarita, if you wouldn't mind, we just have a last slide here. In conclusion, Sarita, I want to say thanks to you for sharing your expertise with our industry partners. I'm sure that they enjoyed hearing from someone with a different perspective and vantage point within GSA. Also, I want to thank Lori Jennings, the 8A Stars 3 Program Manager, for assisting with the logistics of this event. I know she was answering questions and answers, and you guys just saw her running the poll. So Lori, thanks again for all your help. Industry partners. As I mentioned earlier, GSA is working diligently to support small business GSA contract holders through a post-award engagement strategy. We encourage you to participate in roundtable discussions and other outreach activities hosted by GSA's OSDBU office. We are happy to see that several 8A STARS program industry partners, both past and present, are actively participating. Lastly, please ensure that you have submitted your 8A STARS 3 webpage for review or have made any corrections. If you have any questions about this or anything else with the 8A STARS 3 GWAC, as always, please send an email to s3@gsa.gov. And please, please, please include your contract number and the reason for your email in your subject line. With that being said, this concludes today's 8A STARS 3 How to Market Your Federal Contract. Thank you. Goodbye.